Black billionaire denied entry to his son's graduation. Then 6 SEALs showed who he really was. The security guard's hand shot out, stopping him cold. "Sir, this area is for family members only," the guard said, his tone clipped, his eyes darting down to the man's jeans and plain polo. Malcolm Creed held up his invitation, embossed in gold. "I am family. I'm here for Elijah Creed, that's my son." The guard didn't even look at the invitation. "I said this section is for family and guests who passed our clearance list. I don't see your name, sir." People were beginning to stare. A few parents in suits and dresses glanced over from behind velvet ropes, whispering. A woman in a pearl necklace tugged her child closer as if Malcolm were a threat. Malcolm exhaled slowly, jaw clenched. "Let me through." "The ceremony starts in 15. The second guard stepped in, younger, more eager. "Look, you need to back off. I don't care what you say." "You're not going in looking like that. These are private school grounds. We have standards." The sting wasn't in the words. It was in the tone, the assumption. Malcolm Creed, worth over $2 billion, founder of Apex Stratagem Defense Solutions, stood outside the gates of a prestigious Massachusetts prep school, blocked from his own son's graduation. He could have played the card. He could have dropped the name, the title, even the contract his company had with the Department of Defense currently running security protocols in 4 NATO countries, but he didn't. Not yet, because it wasn't just about him. It was about how easily a black man, no matter his success, could still be reduced to nothing in someone else's eyes. He stepped back, watched the guards laugh and resume scanning IDs. Behind him, a mother in a floral dress whispered to another, probably a delivery guy who got lost. He didn't flinch. He texted Elijah. No answer. Then, from behind him, a voice. "Is there a problem, sir?" Malcolm turned to see a man in uniform, not a school security guard, but military, navy dress blues. And behind him, 5 more men approached, moving in sync, calm. Precise. Malcolm didn't speak. He didn't need to. The first SEAL gave a nod. "Mr. Creed, your son requested we make sure you were treated with respect today." One by one, all 6 of them turned toward the guards. Their medals gleamed in the sun. "Problem is," the leader said, "this man is our commanding officer, and unless you want a congressional hearing breathing down your neck by sunset, I'd suggest you let him pass." The guards paled. One stammered, We didn't know." "You didn't care to know," Malcolm said quietly. Then he stepped forward, the rope parting in silence as 6 SEALs escorted him to the front row. But that moment, that confrontation, it was only the beginning. 2 days earlier, Malcolm had stood alone in his Boston office overlooking the harbor. Apex's headquarters was sleek, high-rise, and almost too sterile. His executive assistant, Cora, had buzzed in. "Sir, the school said you were removed from the guest list." "Removed?" Malcolm turned. "I confirmed last month." She nodded grimly. "Apparently there was a complaint filed, unspecified, from someone in the board." I dug deeper. The term used was public disruption risk. He didn't even blink. That word, risk, had followed him all his life. In banking, in partnerships, in real estate deals where white clients would get champagne and he got silence. Cora leaned forward. "Do you want me to handle it?" "No." He stood. "I'll go myself." "Under your name?" He paused. Then shook his head. "No, just as a father." Elijah had spent the past 4 years battling expectations. Not just as the son of a mogul, but as a young black man in a school that barely tolerated difference. He kept his head down, aced every class, ignored the whispers, but he noticed things. Like how his friend Nick's dad could show up in torn jeans and still get ushered to the VIP lounge, while Malcolm had to wear a suit just to be acknowledged. That's why, when Elijah learned his dad had been removed, he didn't rage. He acted. He called in a favor from 6 men who owed Malcolm their lives, men who didn't just follow orders, they followed loyalty. Back in the present, as Malcolm sat down, every eye turned to him. Not because of the men flanking him, but because of the way he held himself. Calm. Grounded, unapologetically present. The headmaster, a tall white man with horn-rimmed glasses, stuttered at the podium. Before we begin today's ceremony, I'd like to acknowledge a distinguished guest. His eyes darted to Malcolm. This institution values all families and... Malcolm raised a hand. Spare it. Gasps rippled. But he didn't care. He locked eyes with his son across the lawn. Elijah smiled. Then stood when his name was called. Valedictorian, Elijah Creed. Applause thundered, but it was more than that. It was vindication, because Malcolm hadn't come to make a scene. He came to be present. And sometimes, presence is the loudest power of all. But in the shadows of the school, someone wasn't clapping. Board member Philip Graves, the man who filed the anonymous complaint, scowled from the faculty tent. He picked up his phone. This isn't over, he muttered. He was right. Because what happened next would unravel more than just one man's prejudice. It would expose the ugly truths buried deep in institutions built to exclude. And Malcolm Creed wasn't done yet. The moment Elijah stepped off the stage, his diploma clutched in one hand, and the weight of 4 years of silence finally lifted, he made a beeline for his father. Malcolm stood waiting near the rose-draped archway, a rare softness in his expression. His SEAL escorts had melted into the crowd, their presence no longer needed. You made it, Elijah breathed, wrapping his arms around his father. Malcolm pulled him in tighter. I never left. But even as they embraced, Malcolm's gaze caught something beyond his son's shoulder. A figure standing stiff near the faculty tent. Philip Graves. Their eyes locked for a second. Just long enough for Malcolm to read the message written all over the man's face. You don't belong here. Malcolm released Elijah and straightened. Let's get out of here, son. We've got celebrating to do. But Elijah didn't move. Did they really try to keep you out? They did more than try. Elijah's jaw tensed. They're lucky you didn't blow the roof off. Malcolm smiled faintly. That would have been too easy. Some walls are better brought down brick by brick. As they walked toward the parking lot, a voice rang out behind them. Mr. Creed, a moment if you will. It was Philip Graves, the same man who had tried to erase Malcolm from the guest list. His crisp linen suit contrasted with the sweat blooming under his collar. Malcolm turned slowly. I'm done listening to cowards today. Graves took a breath. Look, I didn't know about your background. If someone had just informed the board, Malcolm cut him off. So I needed a net worth statement to watch my son graduate? That's not what I meant. You meant exactly that. I wasn't a risk until you decided I looked like one. And now you're covering your ass because someone showed up with more medals than you have integrity. Graves's mouth tightened. We have an image to maintain. Parents with concerns. You have to understand. Malcolm took a step closer. No, you understand something. You're not going to bury this in a school memo. This isn't over. I'm filing a civil rights complaint, and I'm sending copies to every news desk from Boston to DC. Graves looked like he'd swallowed a nail. You wouldn't dare. Oh, I'd enjoy it. Before Graves could respond, Malcolm turned to Elijah. Let's go. They walked away, but the weight of injustice lingered in every step. Back in the car, Elijah stared out the window. "I'm sorry, Dad." "You don't apologize for other people's smallness." "I wanted today to be different." Malcolm's voice softened. "It was. You stood tall. You didn't hide." "That's more than most men twice your age manage." Elijah hesitated, then asked, "Why didn't you tell them who you were? I mean, you could have shut it all down." Malcolm's fingers tapped the steering wheel. "Because, son, if I have to announce my value for people to treat me like a human being, then we've already lost." They drove in silence for a while until Elijah spoke again. "So, what happens next?" Malcolm's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "We push back. And this time, we don't do it quietly." That evening, Malcolm met with Cora in his home office, a warm study filled with maps, war memorabilia, and the worn photo of his late wife near the window. Cora placed a folder on the desk. "Internal emails from the school. I pulled them from an anonymous parent contact." Malcolm flipped it open. There it was, an exchange between Graves and a few board members. One line stood out. "Let's be proactive. We don't need another incident like last year. Keep the guest list clean. That includes the Creed man." Malcolm sat back. "They've done this before." Cora nodded. A black family tried to challenge a grading policy last spring. Suddenly their kid was disinvited from senior awards night. He exhaled slowly. "Time to make this public." But Cora didn't flinch. "You sure? You'll make enemies." "And they won't fight fair. I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to make sure the next kid doesn't have to prove his father is a billionaire just to be seen." He stood and reached for his phone. "Get me Colonel Rivas." "And the mayor. And I want this on the evening broadcast before they have a chance to spin it." The next morning, Malcolm's story hit the headlines. "Black billionaire blocked from graduation while white parents weren't even checked." Former Navy officer turned CEO speaks out on discrimination. 6 SEALs escort Creed past school racism. And with it came the flood. Messages from parents, from veterans, from students who had stories of their own. Slights, suspensions, harassment hidden behind bureaucracy. But it wasn't until Malcolm's phone rang that afternoon that things shifted. The caller ID read, "Office of the Secretary of Education." He answered. "Mr. Creed, this is Assistant Secretary Helena Vasquez. We've seen the coverage." "The Secretary wants to meet you. In person." Malcolm's brows lifted. "Why now?" "Because they're scared," she said. "And because you just exposed a rot that runs deeper than anyone wants to admit." Malcolm looked out his window. The city skyline gleamed under the afternoon sun. They should be. But even he didn't realize the retaliation was already brewing. Because Philip Graves wasn't finished, and the school wasn't the only institution trying to silence him. What came next would test not just Malcolm's resolve, but the safety of everyone he loved. The media storm wasn't just loud, it was seismic. Overnight, Malcolm Creed had gone from a silent figure at the back of a graduation ceremony to the face of a national conversation. His name trended for hours. TV hosts argued over him, Twitter exploded, and talk radio hosts couldn't decide whether to celebrate or condemn him. But while the public spotlight flared, a darker current moved quietly beneath it. In a conference room inside the state's Department of Education, Philip Graves sat across from 2 men in suits, neither of whom gave their names, but both of whom radiated authority. One of them closed the blinds while the other slid a folder across the table. "Are you telling us," the man with the folder asked, "you didn't know who Malcolm Creed was?" Graves swallowed. "I didn't know he was that Malcolm Creed." "Then why did you flag him weeks before the ceremony?" Graves stammered. "We had concerns about security." He wasn't listed in the database. He didn't respond to the RSVP form. The man leaned forward. You used words like undesirable presence and donor discomfort in internal emails. This wasn't a clerical error. It was a decision. I was protecting the integrity of the event. You were protecting the comfort of white money. Philip froze. The second man, still silent until now, finally spoke. You've started something you can't control. If Creed digs deeper, if he finds certain funding sources, you're not just dealing with bad press. You're dealing with criminal exposure. Graves looked stunned. Criminal? The first man shut the folder. You were sloppy. And now if this goes federal, so are we. Clean it up. Graves exhaled shakily. How? The two men stood. Discredit him. Or disqualify him. Back at Malcolm's home in Northern Virginia, Elijah watched his father pace the kitchen with military precision. Cora leaned against the counter, typing rapid-fire emails on her tablet. You need to see this, Elijah said, holding up his phone. A conservative commentator had just posted a thread claiming Malcolm faked his SEAL record. Another article cited anonymous sources claiming he never graduated from the Naval Academy. Photos of Malcolm in uniform were being dissected by amateur experts online. They're trying to rewrite your life, Elijah said. They always do, Malcolm muttered. When they can't beat you in the open, they attack your history. Cora looked up. We knew they'd come. We just didn't think they'd move this fast. Malcolm stopped pacing. They're trying to make noise, confuse people, cast doubt. Delay real action. Cora's expression hardened. So what's the move? We go louder. The next morning, Malcolm appeared on Good Morning America. He wore a dark blue suit, medals displayed prominently, and his tone was calm, unflinching. What happened at East Ridge Academy is not new, he said into the camera. It is not unique. It's simply one more layer of a system that prefers control over justice. That wants silence from people who look like me, but I will not be silent. His voice never rose, but his message hit like thunder. When the host tried to pivot to questions about his net worth or political leanings, Malcolm cut clean through. This isn't about my money. This is about my right, as a father, as a citizen, to exist without proving myself. The interview sparked a second wave of attention, but it also triggered something else. Later that evening, Malcolm received a call from one of his old SEAL teammates, Logan Hunt, a man built like a wall and loyal to the bone. Mal, I'm getting chatter, Logan said. Real chatter? Someone's digging into your military records, trying to get access to your sealed files. Malcolm's jaw clenched. That's not just desperation, that's illegal. Yeah, and someone's burning favors to make it happen. You think it's Graves? I think it's bigger. I think you kicked a hornet's nest. Malcolm looked out the window at the darkening sky. Let them come. Be careful, Mal. You're playing with fire. I've played with worse. That night, as Malcolm closed his laptop, he heard a noise from the front gate. A black SUV parked in front of his house, lights off. It idled for 30 seconds, then rolled away. A message. Cora checked the security cameras. No plates, no ID. They were being watched. The next morning, the attack went personal. An anonymous email blast leaked a falsified bank document suggesting Malcolm's company was under IRS investigation. Old photos of Malcolm during an anti-war protest decades ago were recirculated, cropped out of context. And worst of all, someone published the address of his home. Journalists camped out by his driveway. Drones hovered. One even crashed into a tree on the lawn. Elijah couldn't take it. Why are we just sitting here? We should sue every one of them. Malcolm placed a firm hand on his shoulder. We fight smart, not fast. But they're trying to destroy you. They're trying to make me flinch. And I won't give them that. Cora appeared in the doorway. But maybe it's time we stop reacting. Maybe it's time we strike first. She dropped a new folder on the table. What's that? Malcolm asked. A full list of East Ridge donors. Names. Amounts. Ties to private prison contractors. Lobbying groups, PACs, and one particularly ugly board member who made a fortune off segregated charter schools. Malcolm opened the folder. His eyes narrowed. This is the real battlefield. Cora nodded. And you just found the first weak spot. Malcolm looked at Elijah. You ready to make some noise, son? Elijah's voice was steady. Let's burn it down. As they planned their next steps, none of them noticed the quiet click of a nearby phone. Someone on the inside had been listening, and they were about to tip off the very people Malcolm was preparing to expose. The fight wasn't just public anymore. It had just gone underground. The boardroom at East Ridge Academy pulsed with quiet tension. The long oak table, normally a space for polite strategy sessions and donor updates, now felt like a war room. At the head sat Headmaster Philip Graves, flanked by a legal advisor and a member of the board, Claudia Finch, a polished woman with steel blue eyes and a history of suppressing scandals before they reached headlines. We can't keep this quiet anymore, Claudia said, her voice sharp. He's too loud. Too clean, too strategic. The longer this goes, the more control we lose. Philip shifted uncomfortably. I've tried. We've fed stories to every outlet that would listen, but none of them are sticking. Creed doesn't have skeletons. If he does, they're buried deeper than any of us can reach. Then bury him with something else, Claudia snapped. Fabricate if you have to. Leak school documents. Say Elijah cheated his way in. Claim academic fraud. Philip balked. That's a child, Claudia. Not to the press. To them he's a symbol, and if we can smear the son, the father goes with him. Philip didn't respond. He simply stared at the folder in front of him. The plan was uglier than anything he'd executed before, and for the first time, he felt fear. Not of Malcolm Creed, but of the mirror he'd have to face once this was all over. Meanwhile, in Malcolm's home office, Cora clicked through a series of encrypted files she'd received from an anonymous tip line. The sender had used the alias Watcher. The contents were damning. Financial connections between East Ridge's largest donors and a series of corporations lobbying to resegregate school districts under the guise of academic excellence. Cora, Malcolm said as he entered the room, what are you looking at? You need to see this. As he leaned in, her voice dropped. This isn't just about you. East Ridge has been running a silent admission pipeline, quietly rejecting applicants from certain zip codes, manipulating diversity quotas, all while inflating their inclusivity stats for grant money. And they were bold enough to deny me at my own son's graduation? That wasn't just racism. That was fear. They knew exactly who you were, and they knew you could expose this. Malcolm stood up. His voice was cold steel. Then let's expose it. But just as they began assembling their plan, a sharp knock came at the door. When Elijah opened it, he found a young man in a rumpled hoodie holding a manila envelope. I don't want trouble, the man said quickly, but they're coming after your family. I used to work in the East Ridge IT department. I saw emails, logs. They're planning to file a disciplinary case against your son. Say he hacked school records. That he used your money to bribe teachers. Elijah stepped back, stunned. What? That's insane. I know. That's why I quit. But they've already planted the data. Digital fingerprints. Screenshots. A full narrative. If you don't get ahead of it now, it'll blow up next week. Cora pulled the envelope from the man's hand, rifling through it. Her face darkened. It's all here, she whispered. They created a trail. And it's convincing. Malcolm clenched his jaw. We need to go public. No, Cora replied, eyes still scanning the files. We go tactical. If they're playing dirty, we play smarter. Later that night, Logan Hunt arrived unannounced. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood 5 other men, tall, broad, quiet. All former SEALs, all part of Malcolm's old unit. We saw the headlines, Logan said. And then we saw the attacks. You're not fighting this alone. Malcolm looked at each of them. You sure about this? They'll come after you too. One of the SEALs, a man named Reyes, crossed his arms. We've had your back in Afghanistan, Somalia, and half a dozen places the world doesn't know about. Some Ivy League boardroom doesn't scare us. Malcolm nodded. Good, because I'm going to war. By morning, the Creed household was a hub of operations. Elijah and Cora worked on compiling evidence to debunk the school's narrative, while Malcolm coordinated with his SEAL team to trace leaks, secure their network, and prep a counter-offensive. But the real twist came when Cora traced the original digital forgery back to a shell company, one that funneled money directly into East Ridge's scholarship fund. And guess who owns the shell company? She said. Tell me, Malcolm said. Claudia Finch. She's not just on the board. She's been laundering money for a network of private education interests. And now she's trying to scapegoat your family to protect her entire house of cards. Malcolm exhaled slowly. Then it's time to kick the damn thing down. But before they could make their next move, an emergency news alert popped onto every screen in the room. Breaking. Elijah Creed, under investigation for academic misconduct at East Ridge Academy. The headlines poured in. News vans parked outside again, commentators speculated, hashtags trended. East Ridge released a carefully worded statement that painted Elijah as a promising student who may have succumbed to external pressure. Elijah stared at the TV, fists clenched. They did it. They actually did it. Malcolm didn't flinch. Then we do what they fear most. What's that? Elijah asked. We shine a brighter light than they can handle. That night, Malcolm released a video. Just him. No suit, no script. I served this country for 22 years. I kept secrets for a living, but not tonight. Tonight I'm telling you the truth. He laid out everything. His denial at the ceremony, the school's backroom deals, the forged accusations and the money trails. He dropped names, dates, receipts. By the time the video ended, it had over 5 million views. By dawn, it would be 10. And deep in her penthouse office, Claudia Finch watched the footage with a shaking hand. He's going to ruin us, she whispered. But the man beside her, a state official with deep pockets and shallow ethics, gave a grim smile. Then it's time we make this personal. Let's see how he handles losing something he can't buy back. Because their next move wouldn't be legal. It would be human, and it would hurt. The sun rose into a sky already buzzing with tension. Inside the Creed estate, phones were ringing non-stop. Elijah's name was everywhere. News anchors debated his character. Comment sections overflowed with praise and prejudice. A few called it a setup. Many believed it wasn't. That was how fast the lie had spread. Elijah hadn't spoken much since the video dropped. He just sat by the window, staring at nothing. You okay? Malcolm asked gently, sitting beside his son. Elijah didn't answer at first. Then finally, I don't even know what's real anymore. Malcolm placed a hand on his shoulder. You're real. The work you've done is real. Your integrity, your spirit, your heart, those things are untouchable, no matter what narrative they try to force. Elijah looked up. They said I hacked into the school system, Dad, that I changed my own grades. Do you know how humiliating that is? Kids at school already look at me like I don't belong. Now they think I cheated to get here. They think what they're told, Malcolm said. We're going to change what they hear. Across town, Claudia Finch was busy polishing her next move. The fabricated evidence had taken root faster than she expected, but she wasn't satisfied yet. We need to isolate him, she told Philip Graves on a secure line. Get his teachers to publicly condemn the act. Dig up any disciplinary infraction from kindergarten if you have to. You're playing a dangerous game, Philip replied, his voice tight. The father's not backing down. He's gaining sympathy. That video he posted. It's gone viral. Claudia's tone turned icy. Then burn it all down. If Malcolm Creed wants a war, I'll show him how ruthless I can be. Meanwhile, Logan and the SEAL team had discovered something far more dangerous than Claudia's scheming. They had traced an encrypted communication to a known fixer operating out of DC, a man known only as Harridan, with deep ties to political smear campaigns. And the message was clear. Make the Creed kid disappear, metaphorically, or not. Malcolm read the file and froze. They're escalating. This isn't about Elijah anymore. They're trying to take me out. No, Cora corrected. They're trying to provoke you. They want you to act out. To lose your temper. To become the angry black billionaire stereotype they can tear apart publicly. But what if they come after him? Malcolm's voice cracked slightly. He's just a kid. He's not just anything, Cora said firmly. He's your son, and if we stay sharp, stay clean, and outthink them, we'll win. Back at East Ridge, Elijah returned to class under heavy scrutiny. His classmates whispered behind his back. His teachers eyed him with suspicion, but he kept his head high, until Mr. Colton, his math teacher, handed him a blank sheet during a quiz. Since you already know all the answers, Colton sneered, loud enough for the whole class to hear. Let's see how you do without hacking the system. Elijah stared at the man, fists clenched. His ears burned. But he said nothing, until Maya, a shy girl from his chemistry lab, stood up. That's not fair, she said, voice shaking. You're humiliating him. He didn't do anything wrong. Colton laughed. You'd be wise not to associate with cheaters, Ms. Lynn. But Maya didn't sit down. She turned toward the class. You all saw the story. But how many of you actually know Elijah? He's the first one in, last one out of every group project. He helped me study for the AP exam. He tutored the twins when they were failing. You think a guy like that would risk everything to fake a grade? The room fell silent. Malcolm watched the exchange later on security footage sent to him anonymously. A silent wave of emotion washed over him. She stood up for him, he whispered. She reminded them who he really is, Cora added. But even with support trickling in, Claudia launched her next strike, a lawsuit. East Ridge Academy versus Malcolm Creed and Elijah Creed, citing defamation, academic dishonesty, and damage to institutional reputation. Malcolm stared at the document, hands trembling. They're suing my son. No, Cora said, stepping beside him. They're suing your legacy. Malcolm looked down at the paper, then back at the screen showing the latest smear segment on national news. He took a deep breath. Then it's time we bring receipts. He held up the folder from the ex-IT employee. Let's leak this. Every detail, every donor, every falsified number. We blow the lid off the entire East Ridge network. And Elijah? Logan asked. This will follow him for life. That's why we make sure when this hits, he's not the one who has to explain himself. As the team assembled the files, Cora's voice rang out from across the room. Guys, we've got a problem. She pulled up a series of private emails, real-time surveillance. Claudia Finch was coordinating with a state official to have Elijah's full academic history scrubbed, scholarships revoked, future applications flagged.
"They're trying to erase him," Cora said. "Not just now, forever."
Malcolm's face turned to stone. "No more defense," he said. "We go on offense." That night, a new video dropped. But this time, it wasn't Malcolm. It was Elijah. He stood in front of his father's bookshelf, looking directly into the camera. "My name is Elijah Creed. I didn't hack anything. I didn't cheat. But even if I did, does that justify what's happening to my family? Does that justify stripping away everything I worked for because of who my dad is?" He paused. "You want a villain? I'm not him. But if you keep pushing, I'll show you what it looks like when truth fights back." By morning, every major network had picked up the clip, and somewhere in a dim office, Harridan watched it unfold. "We underestimated the kid," he muttered. But Claudia was already dialing a number. "Get me someone at the state board. I want that graduation event shut down." "Entire thing shut it down." Because if the Creeds couldn't be erased quietly, she'd make sure they were silenced loudly. And she had no idea that the SEALs were already moving to make sure her next move would be her last. The morning of East Ridge Academy's graduation arrived under a thick, uneasy cloud. News vans lined the school's perimeter like vultures. Police stood guard at every entrance. The once celebratory banners flapped nervously in the breeze. The principal's office was in chaos. Inside the security booth, the school administrator barked orders into his radio. "No unauthorized press. Check every invite. I want facial recognition scans before anyone gets near the main building." Claudia Finch stood just behind him, arms folded, eyes scanning the monitors. Her voice was ice. "If the Creeds show up, you turn them away. If they resist, call the cops, make a scene." "I don't care." Meanwhile, across town, Malcolm Creed stood in front of his bedroom mirror, adjusting the cufflinks on his tailored navy suit. His expression was hard, controlled. Next to him, Elijah sat quietly, dressed in his black cap and gown, fingers tapping nervously on his knees. "You ready?" Malcolm asked. "I'm ready to see who shows up for me," Elijah replied. "Even if it's just you." Cora appeared in the doorway holding a phone. "The live stream's set. Over 50,000 people are already waiting. Malcolm, the moment you step out of that car, you're not just a dad. You're a message." Malcolm met her gaze. "Then let's make it loud." They climbed into a black SUV, followed by a separate vehicle where Logan and 2 other former SEALs rode in plain clothes. Each of them carried a mission bag. As they approached the school gates, Malcolm slowed the SUV. "That's a blockade," he muttered. Police had set up temporary barriers at the front entrance. Behind them, Claudia stood with her arms crossed, a thin smile on her lips. The head officer stepped forward and knocked on the window. "I'm going to need you to turn around, sir," he said. Malcolm lowered the window. "I'm the father of the valedictorian." "Doesn't matter," the officer replied. "We've been instructed that you are not permitted on school property." Elijah leaned forward. "It's my graduation." "I understand, son," the officer said with a sigh. "But it's above my pay grade." Behind them, Logan stepped out of the secondary vehicle. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked the officer calmly. "This isn't a threat," the cop replied, raising a hand. "We've got orders." Malcolm looked to Elijah. "You want to go back?" Elijah shook his head. "No, not this time." Malcolm nodded once, then stepped out of the vehicle. He turned toward the crowd of cameras now gathering near the school fence. "My name is Malcolm Creed," he called out. "My son is Elijah Creed. Today is supposed to be his graduation."
But apparently our presence is more dangerous than guns in school. The crowd stirred. The live feed exploded. The comments section flooded. Inside the auditorium, the program began awkwardly. The principal stood at the podium, forcing a smile. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, one of our students will not be in attendance today. The doors at the back burst open. Malcolm entered first, calm, composed. Then Elijah, cap on, gown swaying, head high, and behind them, 6 men filed in, silently taking formation: Logan, Harris, Dom, Torres, Shepard, and Reed. All former SEALs, all expressionless. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Claudia shot up from her seat. "You can't be in here!" she shouted. "This is trespassing!" Malcolm walked down the center aisle, never breaking stride. "You wanted to silence us," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "You wanted to bury my son's future under lies, threats, and payoffs. But the truth doesn't need permission to walk into a room." He gestured to Elijah. "This young man is the top student in this institution, and today he will walk across that stage, even if I have to build him one myself." Security moved forward, but the SEALs stepped in front of Malcolm and Elijah like human shields. Logan leaned toward the head of security and said quietly, "You really want to make national headlines tonight? Stop this nonsense and let the kid graduate." The principal, red-faced and shaking, whispered something to the school board rep. The rep blanched. He looked at Claudia, who stared back in fury, then reluctantly gave a nod. The principal stepped back to the mic, clearing his throat. "Please welcome this year's valedictorian, Elijah Creed." Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then thunderous. Elijah stood motionless for a second, taking it all in. As he stepped onto the stage, he looked at his father, then at Maya, then at Claudia, who was now dialing frantically on her phone. Elijah turned to the microphone. "You tried to erase me," he began. "But you didn't know I was built to survive erasure." The room quieted. No one moved. "You tried to shame me, because I didn't fit your mold of success. Because my father's power made you uncomfortable. Because my skin doesn't match your definition of legacy. But I didn't need to hack anything. I didn't need to cheat. I just needed to show up. And that's exactly what I'm doing." He paused, then said softly, "This stage is mine." As he stepped down, Malcolm reached up and wiped a tear from his own cheek. Outside, Claudia stood with her phone still pressed to her ear. "Get me the governor's office," she barked. "This isn't over." But before she could finish, a voice interrupted. "That won't be necessary." Claudia turned and froze. Standing behind her was Agent Barrett from the Department of Justice, flanked by 2 agents in dark suits. "Claudia Finch," he said, "we'd like a word about the wire transfers from the Harridan Group and the forged evidence submitted to the State Education Board." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "This is harassment," she said weakly. "No," Barrett said. "This is accountability." Back inside, Malcolm and Elijah stood side by side in the center of the stage. "This is just the beginning," Elijah whispered. Malcolm smiled. "No, son. This is the moment everything changes." And the world was watching. The sun had barely risen the next morning when the media frenzy exploded. Clips from Elijah's speech were everywhere. TikTok, YouTube, CNN. Headlines read like poetry written in revenge. Black billionaire's son reclaims his stage. SEALs escort valedictorian past corruption. Claudia Finch under federal investigation. At Malcolm's estate, the mood was somewhere between exhausted and electric. Elijah sat at the kitchen table, still in pajamas, scrolling through the endless cascade of messages flooding his phone.
20 million views, he whispered. In less than 12 hours. Malcolm poured coffee, setting a mug in front of his son. The world was starving for truth, and you gave them a full-course meal. Elijah looked up. I didn't think I could do it, not really. I thought they'd find a way to break me before I ever got to that stage. Malcolm sat across from him. They tried, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. Before Elijah could respond, Logan entered the room with Cora, both holding tablets. You might want to sit down for this, Logan said, handing Malcolm the screen. On it was a document dump, bank transfers, email exchanges, voice recordings, all pointing back to a coordinated campaign to blackmail Malcolm into withdrawing Elijah from the school months earlier. Cora added, Barrett's team traced payments from Claudia Finch to a super PAC that lobbied against your tech contracts in 3 states. There's a web here, Malcolm. Deep and nasty. Elijah leaned over to see. Wait, this isn't just about me? Cora shook her head. No, it was about bringing your father down, discrediting his empire, using you as leverage. Malcolm's jaw tightened. They targeted my child to break my legacy. Just then, a phone rang. It wasn't Malcolm's or Elijah's, it was Logan's. He answered sharply. Go. A pause. His eyes widened slightly. Copy that. We'll prepare. He ended the call and looked around. They're issuing subpoenas for 4 school board members. The DOJ is prepping a federal corruption case, and the governor's chief of staff wants a meeting. Elijah's eyes went wide. All because I walked across a stage? No, Cora said. Because you exposed what they tried to bury, and now they can't stop the bleeding. Malcolm stood and walked to the window, staring out at the wide expanse of his property. We need to act fast. If we sit on this, they'll spin it. Logan nodded. What do you have in mind? Malcolm turned around slowly. A press conference. I want every camera in the country pointed at us when we lay this out. No whispers. No filters. Full transparency. That night, inside the grand ballroom of the Langston Hotel, the press arrived in droves. Cameras flashed. Networks cut in live. Reporters elbowed their way to the front of the velvet ropes. On stage stood Malcolm Creed, flanked by Elijah, Cora, Logan, and Agent Barrett. Malcolm stepped to the microphone. The room hushed. I didn't come here today as a billionaire. Or as a man whose child was denied his right to be celebrated. I came here as a father, one who watched a system try to crush his son to protect its own image. He gestured to Elijah, who stood tall and calm. What they didn't expect was that the next generation, our children, would be stronger than their lies. He tapped the tablet in front of him and projected documents behind them. Transaction logs, secret recordings, internal memos from the school board. The people responsible for this mess have names. They wear suits, sit on boards, and write checks with other people's futures. But tonight, we unmask them. Cora stepped forward and read off the list of names. One by one, each tied to kickbacks, fraudulent contracts, or political deals. The room buzzed with reporters frantically scribbling. Suddenly, a voice from the crowd shouted, Mr. Creed, what do you say to those who think this is revenge? Malcolm replied without hesitation. This is not revenge. It's reckoning. Then he handed the mic to Elijah. I didn't ask to be a symbol, Elijah said. I just wanted to graduate. But they turned my name into a battlefield, so now I'll be a soldier if I have to. Applause burst through the room. Just as Malcolm stepped away, his phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen. Governor's office requesting private meeting. DOJ has authorized cooperation. He looked at Logan, then nodded. It's time. The moment was electric. The press,
The public, even the critics, could feel it. Something had shifted. And far across town, in a dark office, Claudia Finch watched the conference in silence. Her desk was bare, her phone disconnected.
She sat frozen as her image flashed across every news channel, labeled "under federal investigation." Her mouth twitched. Not anger, not denial. Just the creeping realization that she had bet everything, and lost to the very people she once dismissed. Back at the hotel, Elijah turned to his father and whispered,
"So, what now?" Malcolm smiled. "Now, son, we build something bigger than revenge. We build a legacy they can't tear down." And with that, they stepped down from the stage, together, unstoppable. The day of reckoning didn't end with headlines. It unfolded in courtrooms, city halls, and boardrooms across the country. But for Malcolm Creed and his son Elijah, the real victory wasn't about public takedowns. It was about healing. A week after the press conference, the Creed Foundation hosted its annual gala, this time with a new mission: education reform. Elijah walked through the grand hall of the Langston Civic Center, wearing a tailored navy suit and a proud smile. Beside him, Malcolm greeted guests ranging from political leaders to local educators, each of them now invested in reshaping how minority students were treated in elite institutions. As the room quieted, Elijah took the stage once again. But this time, there were no obstacles between him and the microphone.
"My story isn't just mine," he began. "It belongs to every kid who was told they don't belong, to every parent who had to stay silent to protect their child's future, and to every voice that was muted by fear or power. But tonight, that silence ends." The crowd rose in applause. "And to the people who tried to use their power to shut me out, thank you. Because you made me realize the stage I was meant to stand on is so much bigger than a gym floor." Off stage, Malcolm watched his son with a mixture of awe and quiet pride. But then, something unexpected happened. A young woman stepped forward from the crowd. She was barely 20, her voice trembling. "My name is Olivia Carter. I used to be in the same school district as Elijah. I dropped out last year after being racially profiled and suspended for something I didn't do. I thought no one would ever care." Her voice cracked, but she continued. "Watching Elijah walk across that stage, it gave me courage. I'm enrolling back into school next week, and I just wanted to say thank you." The room went silent. Elijah stepped down from the podium and embraced her. No cameras. No headlines. Just two people, united by truth. From the corner of the ballroom, Logan leaned over to Cora. "He really changed the game." "No," she replied. "He changed the rules." Later that night, Malcolm stood alone on the rooftop, looking out over the city skyline. Elijah joined him, 2 glasses in hand. "You ever imagine it would end like this?" Elijah asked. "I imagined worse," Malcolm said, chuckling. "But I also imagined this moment. You standing tall, unapologetic. Me, not fixing your future, but fighting beside you while you built it." Elijah nodded. "So what now?" Malcolm turned to him, eyes steady. "Now we go national. Take the foundation to every city that needs it. Scholarships, legal aid, education policy, whatever it takes." A pause hung between them. "You in?" Elijah didn't hesitate. "I'm in." Down below, spotlights swept across the gala's courtyard, illuminating the Creed Foundation banner hanging from the entrance. It read, "Every child deserves the stage." And as the camera panned out from the rooftop, father and son side by side, it didn't just show the story of one black billionaire and his son. It showed a movement beginning. Because what they tried to silence became a voice too loud to ignore. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you feel seen, don't let it end here. Subscribe to our channel.
Share the story. Be part of the voices that won't stay silent anymore. Because sometimes the most powerful truth is the one they tried to keep off the stage.